Note: the views expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of Three Gimbals. Hey everyone, welcome back, or welcome for the first time to Navigating in Balance, a podcast by Three Gimbals, your stop for the latest of what's going on around the world of intel, defense, and strategy. I'm your host, Benjamin Butler, and I'm really honored today to have a special guest with me, Jack Dougherty with me. He's the co-founder of Janus Marine and Defense, as well as the global head of USVs for Unique Group. So, without further ado, Jack, I'd like to take a minute to let you introduce yourself, tell the audience a little bit about yourself, what your background is, and how you got into the space you are now.
Sure, Ben. I'm a glutton for punishment. That's how you get into the space, to be
Yeah.
honest. No. U.S. Navy did some merchant marine instructions, STCW instructor, DOD, DOS instructor, and then got educated, master's degree in cybersecurity, and kind of meandered my way into unmanned vessels. So,
Wow. Okay. And an Alfa Romeo guy.
yeah, I told you, glutton for punishment. So, it spends more time in the garage than it does in the garage here. So, yeah, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Yeah, I saw the sign in the background and I had to ask, if you get into Italian cars, you're not in it for the reliability. It's a journey. It's a journey you go on. It's an emotional high and emotional low. You got both. You got to take what comes.
Ben, when it's great, it's great. When it's bad, that's about normal. So,
Hey, yep, I get it. But you say you're a glutton for punishment. Working with USVs, I think a lot of people in the audience are familiar with drones. They're everywhere now.
hmm
Everyone's talking about them in defense. They're at every conference, every exhibition. But most of the time when we're thinking drones, we're thinking flying, right?
Yeah.
And now we're starting to see with some of the tactics, Russia, Ukraine, especially early
hmm
on in the war when Ukraine's using essentially at the beginning what amounted to jet skis with bombs attached to them to take out a lot of much more expensive, much larger Russian vessels. What's kind of been the way that we've seen USVs and things like that kind of break into the space? Because they're not as familiar to most people.
No, and they're used more as a force multiplier in that aspect. But USVs have been around for decades, and people just didn't know. I mean, way back in the OWL days with the U.S. Navy, and I mean, I've been doing it since 2018. My two business partners have been doing it since 2014. So, we were doing it when it was genuinely difficult, when there were no systems for systems, everything was independent. And so, if you didn't follow exactly by the numbers when you were trying to get a boat up and running, good chance you were going to have a drop in comms, you're going to have a drop in a sensor, your boat was going to run off and go walkabout on you, and that's the background that Janus comes from, that kind of in-depth technical and operational expertise that was required back then, 7, 8 years ago to consistently run USVs in an operational aspect.
You mentioned that your partners have been in business for a little bit. You yourself have been in the business for a while, but your partners even further back. So taking the audience back to the very beginning,
Sure.
right? What inspired the founding of Janus Defense? How did that come about?
So my two business partners, Nick and Mike, are plank owners for the autonomous mine hunting unit that was forward deployed in Fifth Fleet out in Bahrain.
Okay.
Plank owners, that means they were there at the very beginning. They were one of the original 14 or 15 guys. Mike was side lead, Nick was a tech. And I had already served with Mike in the Navy. So before that, and it was back when I was getting educated, they were out in Bahrain having fun with unmanned boats. And in 2018, Mike gave me a call, asked me if I wanted to come join him. He'd been headhunted by a firm over here in the UAE. And that's where I live now. And so brought Nick, and we all came over and we started working over here for another client. And a couple years into that, everybody dispersed, and then, hey, we need to found something to cut through the smoke and mirrors. It was like you said, Ukraine started coming along. I'd worked IMEX 2022 and just saw that the whole world was changing when it came to USVs.
Wow. Okay, so you had come up through a lot of the operational environment of what was going on. You have a background in the Navy. I take it that kind of inspired at least the beginning of some of this stuff. You got a firsthand eyewitness kind of driver's seat view, right? And you mentioned you were at some events and things like that. What gap did you see in maritime defense specifically that you knew needed to be filled?
Well, a lot of the ILS, the integrated logistics and the operator support just wasn't there. And it was nobody's fault. It was just that this is a newer technology and it's breaching into these new markets, whether it's defense or commercial space. And people just didn't know what was required to keep them running consistently. And, I like to say at the bare bones, a USV has to boat. It has to at least get out on the water and and be functional. If you've got a bespoke USV that you can't even turn on that sits at the side of the pier, it's not doing anyone any good, and it's in fact costing you money. So that is the background we've always looked at it from. Like, it's got to at least be a boat,
Right. And so I'd imagine commercial off-the-shelf components, do those play a role in that maintainability factor?
COTS are great, but that wasn't always the case. And even now, you have some of these very niche capabilities of these assets that require components that are one guy on a lathe, churning it, and there's no spares for things like that. So we like to focus quite a bit on what's available off the shelf, and really push our clients in that aspect, like as much as you can. Whether I'm not always going to have a Marina and a Home Depot right down the road when I need to repair something. Right. Give me something that it might not be 100% combat effective, but it's 90, 85% combat effective with a spare part that I can get off the shelf somewhere.
Sure. Going back to one of the adages that I've heard repeated more and more often recently, I feel like, which is this idea that we don't need a 100% end-all be-all solution for every single operational possibility. We need something that can be fielded at a high rate, that's going to be out there. It's not going to be sitting in the dock. It's not going to be sitting there needing repair all the time. And we're going to be able to get parts for it. And so I think that kind of ethos is definitely where, at least from conversations I've had, where defense and the whole industry, military, industrial, or commercial, where everything seems to be headed is towards this fielding quantity that is capable, as opposed to just a couple bespoke here and there items that are half the time not operational.
Robust, reliable, and cost efficient. That's what you need. Like I said, it can't be sitting at the pier. It's not doing anyone any good. And in effect, it's hurting the industry when they're doing that. The early adopters of USVs, they really bore the brunt of that. And that is a challenge that we're still dealing with now. People who, early adopters for technology are always going to have some trials and tribulations. USVs were exactly that. And, obviously those people now and industries are a bit more hesitant to take the leap. Regardless that we have made leaps and bounds, strides incredibly far in reliability and capability, getting them to get over that initial problem that they had or that concern is difficult. And it requires conversations like this in your podcast and writing articles and discussing, having face-to-face discussions with people to push that idea.
Sure. And yeah, that actually is the perfect segue into a question that I was going to ask, and it gives me a chance to do that. So was that one of the primary challenges you faced, especially in the beginning of Janus? Was it ascending the proverbial mountain in terms of, hey, we need to first off get the customer or get the end user comfortable? Or was it more like, this is a completely new thing and we just need to give them an idea of what they're missing?
Originally, we were more OEM focused, trying to bring our expertise to the manufacturer side, but trying to convince them that every boat driver and engineer isn't a USV operator was difficult. That it was worth paying these contractors who are jack of all trades, so to speak, and that's what's required to run a USV. You can't just be a boat driver. You need to know comms. You need to know mechanics. So your HME, your whole mechanical electrical, is something you need to know. You need to know about computers. You need to know about software, sensors, communications. All these things go in that a person who normally jumps on a boat and just fires it up and takes off doesn't have to think about. And that's the difference. That's where a USV operator is a specialized career field now. I mean, you've got robotic warfare operators now in the U.S. Navy. They've come up with their own, their own training pipeline. That is becoming a career field. And it's the same in the commercial space, whether they're running USVs for offshore oil and gas or whether they're running them for a defense entity, security or military. It's what's needed. You have to have that background, and convincing people to pay when they've already got test boat drivers and engineers on their payroll saying, hey, no, you need to send these 4 guys out to this military exercise because they'll keep your boat running and they'll speak the language. And you've got to be able to speak the language when you're talking to flag rank officers or you're sitting in a brief about what operations are going to go down. You don't want to have the engineer that raises his hand and says, I don't know what a ConOps means. I don't know what an echelon is. And sure. that convincing that took a while, but we got there.
I love to hear that. Based on your experience, is because some people say different things here. Do you think the commercial side of things, do you think industry is ahead of government or military in terms of the career pipeline aspect of this? Or do you think the military is actually kind of taking the lead here and industry's catching up?
Oh, you're going to get me in trouble, Ben. My personal opinion is commercial was ahead of the curve. When I went to IMEX 2022 as a team lead, bringing a 11-meter high-speed interceptor with properly trained, capable, experienced USV operators, I expected to have that same kind of experience with the actual DoD entities that were there, and they just weren't there yet. They didn't have the proper instruction. They didn't have the training pipeline in place. So whether you call them contractors or the commercial entities that are bringing the vessels, we had more experience than they did. And lucky for them, most of us were prior service. And so we could push that and help it along and, do things safely, do dangerous things safely. And that's where we really came into play. So, gotcha. But now U.S. Navy has, with the USV runs that have come up with the robotic warrior ACE rating and the A school that's going to be in place. Wow, they're really on it. I'm happy to see it.
So now it's almost, now that people are on the same page, it's like, okay, we can take off and run with this. Yep. Especially having people, to your point, of speaking the language, not just a bunch of clueless industry people that don't know anything about how military operations are conducted. You're actually able to speak to that and be like, hey, this is an area that could be improved, or this is best practice for operating and things like that, operating these USVs.
Exactly. Right. And setting security zones, setting CPAs, doing those things where, you're following the right proper procedures that the military wants to see. And either whether their people don't know how to do it, luckily we did. So that's really where we came in. And we're still doing that to this day. And OEMs, obviously you're not going to take a brand new boat that's not really tested and trialed, not proven, and just give it to the military. No, you're going to hire people like Janus and have our operators run it and train and build up your training pipeline for you and make sure that you're delivering the best product possible. And that's what everyone wants. I like to say that, no one wins if USVs don't win. So the idea, the concept of unmanned surface vessels in an operational context has to be accepted from everyone, from the offshore installation manager that's on the oil pipeline or oil platform to the flag rank 3-4 star admiral that's worried about his fleet and his security. Everyone has to accept that USVs are the future, and they are going to be integrated into the system. Whether it's manned-unmanned teaming, doesn't matter. It's the future. It's happening. So don't dig your heels in. Be part of the solution. Make sure that your idea is heard, and that's key. That's where the manned element of unmanned, it really will still be around. You need that buy-in and you need that capability.
And you said that you've been appreciative of some of the U.S. Navy's efforts to get to that point, to get to where they are now with USVs. Do you feel like there has been that kind of buy-in, or was that a hurdle that you feel that the industry's had to overcome, or Janus has had to help people overcome?
The maritime industry as a whole is very slow to move, very slow to change.
Okay.
As I like to say, years ago, being a sailing master or a boiler technician was a proper career field that you could retire from. Not quite the way anymore. But I worked at Texas A&M Maritime Academy. I was chief of staff for Michael Rodriguez. He was deputy MARAD. So obviously he had the thought of the U.S. mariner at the forefront of his mind and keeping them employed. And I still think that's the case. You need to have that. As I said, that is the manned part of unmanned. It needs to stay there. That's how you'll get the buy-in. Bring them in, their experience. You know, they're the ones that have sat on the bridge for years at a time. They're the ones that have worked in the engine rooms. There's no difference. The only thing is now they're going to be doing it from a remote operations center, being able to go home every night, and they're not hot, oily, and sweaty anymore, and they can sit down and have a cup of coffee while they're watching their, sit in their watch.
I think that speaks to just the approach that it'll take, to your point of the getting the buy-in from people who are in already, and not making it like, hey, we're some outside group that's trying to come in and take your job. Because
Exactly.
I think that's a lot of the fear that I hear around uncrewed vehicles in general, USVs, UAS, all that stuff is, oh, you're trying to replace people.
Yeah.
And I've never looked at it that way. It's refreshing to hear that that's not really what we're trying to do. We're just trying to ultimately help everybody win. We're trying to help people succeed.
Correct. I mean, there's not a whole lot of typists out there anymore. Why? Because people use computers. Yeah.
Right.
Jobs have to adapt and change. Adapt and change with your job so you stay employed. I have some of my best friends, including my brother-in-law, are real or U.S. Coast Guard merchant Marines. All right, merchant mariners carrying an MMC. The last thing I want to do is put some of my best friends' children out of a job, because it's very family centric when it comes to the maritime industry. If your dad was a sailor, your mom was a sailor, good chance you're going to do something in the maritime field.
Right.
I want those generations to keep going. My grandfather was a merchant marine in World War II. I want that. I want that to happen. I want my son to be able to go on a ship. I want him to have that experience. But I also want him to be smart enough to be able to sit in a remote operations center and run swarm USVs if need be,
Right. So with that in mind, was there a first win that really validated your approach when you were starting this Janus journey that you were on with your business partners? Was there something was there a point you got to where it's like, okay, yeah, I think we're really going to see this momentum continue?
It was when the Janus review came out last year. Our first very select distribution of the Janus review. And then to the overwhelming feedback on that was what made us look around and say, there's something here. Because what we had done, the Janus review cuts the wheat from the chaff. We go through and we find out the real USV manufacturers, not the people who have a picture on a website or who have a pipe dream about, swarm autonomy. No, if you're in the Janus review, you're real. And that meant something. We didn't know that it was going to mean something, but it does. It means that effectively you've got people like myself and and the other people who work at Janus who believe in your product, who think you have something real. And that you should be rewarded for that. You should be differentiated between the people who don't.
I think the term vaporware has been thrown around a lot.
I heard Bo Jardine say that. We refer to it as smoke and mirrors, but yeah, it's
smoke and mirrors. Yeah,
that's it, man. It's the same. And USVs were smoke and mirrors for years. I'm not going to deny it.
Sure.
I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say that there used to be somebody in the little wheelhouse of the USV when it was doing a demo in case something went wrong. We did. It was right. Safety. The last thing you want to do is run your boat up into the rocks, or if you're doing a high-speed demo, but now that's not really necessary anymore. Sure. It's just not. We've made such good strides in the capabilities of USVs, both in commercial and defense. So I'm proud of what I do. I'm proud of the industry. I've got great friends in the industry. Everyone is, like I said, everyone is pushing. No one wins unless USVs win. We all want to win.
Right. And with that in mind, what would you say? So Janus has a number of different services it provides,
Hmm.
correct? As a
Correct.
company.
Yep.
So a part of that is kind of consulting and implementation
Hmm.
of USVs, like helping a group. Hey, be like, hey, we have these USVs, or you have these USVs you purchased. How can we implement? How can we train? How can we operate these? Uh, what kind of role does that kind of customer collaboration have on day-to-day activity? Like, how does that influence um, how approaches a project?
Well, we'll do as much or as little with the customers they want. Some
Okay.
customers, they are adamant that they have the best platform out there. Okay. And they just want us to make sure it runs and it does exactly what, the whatever entity is testing it wants it to do. No problem. Now, well, the clients we prefer are the ones who backtrack to the beginning stages, and they're bringing us in and they're asking us, okay, we've got this manned platform, or we're developing this manned platform, but we want it to be autonomy ready. We want it to be, even in 5 or 10 years, we want to be able to convert, or we want to go from we want level 2 autonomy right now, and in 5 years, we want to be level 4, using the IMO levels of autonomy. Those are the best customers we have when it comes to, we've
Right.
designed and helped build USVs. That's fun. That is the most fun, is clean sheet of paper, helping design and do something that fits a specific ConOps. Very early in the USVs, people built a boat and then found a problem for it to solve. That's not the way anymore. Now we're actively helping solve problems. And that's a whole different spin in the market. That's where the market should always be. But, a lot of people just want to see if they could build an unmanned boat. And hey, I agree. They were cool, they're fun. But now they're real and they're functional and they're solving problems. And that's what we want to see.
For sure. And I think there is a tendency sometimes in defense to over innovate or build
Hmm.
something that doesn't actually address a problem, but just, hey, this can do this cool thing because it's cool and we think someone might want it. But I mean, it's very much not the way things are going. And I think that avoiding the trap of over innovation of, hey, we're gonna just do things because we can do it, and rather than addressing customer needs, that's happened. But pretty cool to hear that you're working with customers, and obviously the dream would be the clean sheet of paper designed from scratch. Like, let's get great minds in the room, let's work with you, let's make this happen so that you can accomplish your mission. That's really cool. So
Yeah.
what what tech, what things are you most excited about in the industry, like right now? What's something you're excited about?
Well, we're opening our first public remote operations center here in the UAE
Oh
in
wow.
Q3. Yeah, so
Okay.
there's a lot of remote operation centers are what really are required for
Hmm.
proper USV operations in the commercial space. No one wants to go on your mothership, really. It's just not the way that it is. And not everyone can afford to build a large rock for themselves
Hmm.
and be private.
Right.
Not everyone's a Fugro, or a Reach Subsea, and they've got great rocks, but that is a barrier to entry for the
Sure.
smaller companies, that might do, say 20 to 30 million a year in revenue. Still not enough. Now they want to dabble their fingers in the USVs, but they're not sure if they really want it because they've got manned boats. Well, how can they properly utilize a USV to its fullest extent? Janus, with our remote operations center, come in. You can rent a pod, and effectively a pod will run a USV. Have a pilot station and a sensor operator and a technician, and you can run a USV from there when you want to, based off the Janus tech, which is we call the portal, the Nexus Janus portal.
Ooh,
And
cool.
yeah, it's an amazing piece of kit. I was at Autonomous Ship last year with John from Nexus, and on the public Wi-Fi at the RAI, thanks to the Nexus portal, I was running a Safine Green, which is a USV here in the UAE. I'm in
Hmm.
Amsterdam, and then I would swap pages and I would pick up a current core camera suite that was on the roof of a building in Vancouver. And I did this all with less than 400 milliseconds of delay on the public Wi-Fi. It's
Wow.
amazing. Uh,
That is
so
no,
it,
that is amazing. That's really
yeah,
cool.
it is,
Okay.
and it's on video. You can see it. There's all sorts of videos out there from the Autonomous Ship Conference last year, and
Sure.
yeah. So with that technology, we push forward, and that's how we're doing the rock, the quarter deck as we call it.
And so that's Q3 of this year. That
Yep,
will be open.
inshallah,
Cool.
yes.
All right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a big lift, but we're pushing forth. So yeah.
I'd be curious, honestly, to know if anything like that's going to be built in the U.S. anytime soon.
Ben, please. Okay, there's people listening to this. I don't want to live in the
Hint,
UAE
hint,
forever.
everyone.
Yeah. I don't want to live here forever.
Right, right,
So
right, right.
yeah, I would like to move back to Houston.
Oh,
Sooner
yeah,
or later, I am from there, and it is the oil and
right.
gas capital of the states. So
That's
yeah,
what
man.
they say.
Yeah, that's we're very comfortable here in the Emirates. I'm CEO of Janus,
Sure.
COO and CTO are there in the States. I run the forward deployed operations and plus unique groups over here, and they're a great company to work with. And so it makes sense for me to be here. And with our experience here for gosh 7 almost 8 years, we have the connections to make it happen, and it's
Right.
needed. The
Oh,
UAE
yeah.
is so forward thinking when it comes to unmanned service vessels that the market is here, and I want to take advantage of that.
Oh, absolutely. So, what advice would you give to people who are looking to get into the industry? Things like, hey, if maybe you're someone who's been on a boat for a long time, maybe you're trying to make the transition. Maybe
Hmm.
you're somebody who's coming up through school, through education, you're early in your career, you want to get into this. What advice would you give to somebody in that position? Because, like you said, you got to know sensors, you got to know comms, you
Yep.
got to know actual boat stuff still.
Yeah,
So, what is that going to look like in your mind?
I know because I see it all the time. To be you have to have at least the baseline capabilities. You got to like tech, and if you don't like tech, and people laugh at me because I'm even though I've got a master's degree in cybersecurity, I'm just not that techie oriented.
Right.
But I like it. I like solving problems. And originally, back in the day, USVs were just a lot of problems. So
Sure.
I was in the Navy. I drove boats for the Riverine Squadron. Then I was at JTAC, so I learned communications. My undergraduate degree is maritime business. My master's degree is cybersecurity. So those things all kind of came together to form the perfect circle of get into the USV game. And anyone that has at least one or two, preferably two of those, you can get in the field. Get your MMC. That's always a step up. Your merchant marine credentials. That lets people know that you have the baseline capabilities to drive a boat. You're drug and alcohol. Well, you're drug free, and just drug testing, etc., etc. That's a great way to start. Have that background, and then there's programs you can go to. University of Southern Mississippi has a program that couple of weeks gets you some stick time, and then if you really like it, there's more than enough manufacturers out there who are constantly looking to hire. Whether you've got a project management background and you want to just do your PM stuff with the USVs, you're a tech, you're a boat driver, it doesn't matter. There's all sorts in this field. It requires all sorts of people. And then once you get your foot in the door, you can pivot and do whatever you want. I didn't
Right.
start as CEO of a USV company that provides ILS and operators. I started as a instructor and as an operator myself. And that's the background that Janus has. I like operators who know how to run boats, who have the opportunity, who can skill to run them by themselves, are the kind of people you want because they'll make it happen. Like I said, it might not be 100% combat effective, but damn it, they're doing it 85% of the way with what they got. And I'll take that other than I'll stand down, boat doesn't do X, we just bring it in, we're done. No, get as much
Get
done as
it
you
done.
can.
Right.
Keep the boat out there. Okay, so you're 85% combat effective. That's better than nothing. Just your
Exactly.
presence is good.
Right.
So, and that's why absolutely love my Janus guys, my operators, and we have a Rolodex of retired military guys that are just amazing. Some of them just want to buy a new Harley, and so they call and they
Sure.
want 2 months of work. or they're accustomed to being deployed and they've been at home for too long and I need a month away.
I gotta get out there.
I gotta get out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so those guys are great because they already speak the language. We already trust them. Most of them we've worked with when we were in the service or when we've been doing USVs. So it just makes it gives our customers and myself that comfort factor when my guys are on the job, that I don't have to worry. They know what's expected of them and they're going to do what's expected.
Absolutely. Love to hear it. So, yeah, when you kind of take a step back and you look at it, like, what do you see as kind of some of the opportunities for innovation in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, manned-unmanned teaming, lightly crewed vessels. Let's manned-unmanned teaming. How are we going to integrate the resisting manned platforms with this new capability? That in itself is going to require quite a bit of deconfliction, big C2 space. Who's going to be who's going to be in charge? How are we going to run things? Is it going to run, like Shield AI? They use like I believe it's an F-18, but then they've got the 2 UAVs that kind of fly in tandem with it, and those are effectively, they just provide protection. Is that what we're going to do? Are we going to have, are they just going to escort high value targets? Is what it is. That's so interesting. C2, manned-unmanned teaming, new vessels, new builds, lightly crewed, optionally crewed. How are we going to make them autonomy ready? And then of course, right now, everyone's big thing is swarm. How can fewer operators run multiple platforms? Computing on the edge. If it's a comms denied environment and we sent the boat, to X, how is, once it hits some demarcation line, all comms go dark. How do we know it's going to get to the target? Well, edge computing, so it's making its own decisions. But then that's got to backtrack. You got to make sure you have the sensors on board that can determine. And then through the sensors, going to have the AI on board that can tell you, okay, well, that's X patrol boat and it's heading 090 and, we're heading 180 and this is how we need to do, it's a crossing scenario and how's it going to do that? And that's the future. That's where people need to come in and help develop the platform further.
Right. Because I think sometimes the conversation goes into either, hey, it's going to look like a team man-unmanned teaming approach where, this is the role that we envision USVs having. And then there's the other camp where it'll all be USVs and like no people, complete autonomy, complete target selection autonomy, et cetera, et cetera. Like, do you think there's room for both? Do you think that ultimately one is better than the other? I've heard conflicting things. What are your thoughts on where these roles may go and evolve to?
In commercial space, it can be fully, collision obstacle avoidance, level 4 autonomy. You've just got a guy sitting there making sure the sensor data that's coming back is good.
Sure.
I want a human in the loop when it comes to defense. I want a human that's going to pull the trigger or push the button. I don't want the computer at this stage to be making those decisions for me. It will happen that way, obviously. Like I tell people, we're more like T500 Terminator, not T1000. All right. We're not at that point yet. We'll get there. Absolutely. But, there'll be a lot of trials and tribulations before we get there, but we'll get there.
Yeah. I think that's a good analogy. Whipping out the Terminator example to identify it. I like that. So switching gears back to Janus. You mentioned Q3 this year. You're creating a remote operating center.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the other big projects or things? Obviously, don't go into too much detail because I know you got to keep the cards close to the vest. But what are you focused on in the near future beyond that? Anything else that's kind of on the horizon?
There's a lot of military exercises going on, and we're broaching out. It was Task Force 59 here in Fifth Fleet. That was the original autonomous task force, and so it was very Fifth Fleet centric right here in Bahrain.
Okay.
And that's where, but now that idea, that nucleus, is starting to spread out to other areas. And other areas require different capabilities. Here in 59, we were using, long loiter ISR platforms like Sail Drone, and then combining them with high-speed interceptors like the Arabian Fox program or the Martech. So effectively, you had a picket line of ISR platforms, and then if they noticed something, they could send a high-speed interceptor out. And so
Gotcha.
that, but some areas don't need that. Some people need counter-drug surveillance, some people need long loiter UUVs, so they're more concerned with subsurface detection. And so that, it started in Bahrain, but it's spread, and the ideas are spreading and they're changing, and Janus is right there changing with them and helping, giving our experience in the field of non-permissive environment operations with USVs, and helping them push along and get to the
Right.
point where they want it to be.
Yeah, and there's so many mission sets out there and different requirements and different things that different customers need. I can't help but think doing some research on illegal fishing. You have
Yep.
Chinese vessels loitering in and around EEZs in South America, and
Hmm.
there's only so many patrol boats, and you can't patrol a couple thousand miles of coastline all at once. You're always going to have gaps, and to me, it's like USVs could be a natural gap filler or like supplementing your patrols, conducting that kind of reconnaissance. I mean, that's one example. Then you have over in Europe, you got your Baltic Sea
Hmm.
cable cutting going on, and oh man, I dragged my anchor for 8 miles and I didn't realize it
I
was
didn't
down.
know.
That's crazy.
Oh,
Yeah,
weird.
like
That's
it's
odd.
yeah, it's like I
Yeah.
didn't even notice that my vessel was moving slower or anything like that. Like
Engines at full power, and I'm just not moving anywhere. Weird.
yeah, like
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting. And
Yeah.
or the research ships that are like, oh, I'm gonna research this undersea internet cable. I didn't know there was so much research going on in those hotspots. That's so weird. But yeah, no, it's to your point. I mean, it sounds like Janus has got some exciting things. There's a lot of different missions out there. There are a lot of different customers, a lot of money to be made. Um, but that's awesome. So that's really cool. So thanks for that. Um, yeah, so finishing here, uh, if you could issue like a call to action to everyone who's listening, next generation defense innovators, people who are working alongside in the industry, what would it be?
Be open to change. Be open to change. The baseline characteristics of your position aren't going to change over the next generation or two. If you drive a boat, you'll still drive a boat. You just might not be on the boat when you do it, but be open to that. That is where we need to be. And that's what I would like to see, whether it's the service academies, whether it's the maritime academies. Be open to a change in the naval architecture field. Be open to a change in how you run a vessel. That's what I want to see. I really do. And I think this generation is the right generation to do that. They grew up PlayStation 5s, computers, iPhones. This is the right
Sure.
generation. How many parents do I know that make their kid go restart the router because they just can't figure it out? You know, and
Yep.
it's the
Yep.
truth. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to see where we pivot to, how we change, and I'm really excited for the generation.
No, thank you for the encouragement. Thanks if you're in the audience listening. Call to arms. So it's time to get going. It's time to get after it. So thanks for listening, everyone. That was Jack Dougherty, co-founder, Janus Marine and Defense LLC, sharing some great insight with us today on navigating imbalance, building for mission resilience, innovating despite resistance, despite pressure, and helping build the future of maritime security. So thank you very much, Jack, for your time. And everyone else, if there's something you want to hear me talk about, if there's something that is out there, a topic that you're interested in exploring, please let us know here on the show. You can find us on LinkedIn, Navigating Imbalance, a podcast by Three Gimbals, YouTube, on the Three Gimbals YouTube channel, or on Spotify, Navigating Imbalance. So with that being said, everybody, thank you. Whoever you are out there, we appreciate you. And Jack, thank you for your time. Good luck. Sounds like you got some big things, and I'm looking forward to reading the review, man.
Thanks, Ben. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the invite. Look forward to the next time.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll talk soon, and thanks, everybody.